In the duration of Planck's constant, water has two states, male and female. And one happens in an instant, and one takes a duration. So within the moment that's defined by h, the Newton meter second squared, the square is missing. So I can replace the square because I'm working inside quantum. So Newton meter second squared. I've got everything I need there now in units in terms of time. That equals a real second of a duration 6.626. 07015 times 10 to the minus 34 seconds equals 1 second. Real second created from this motion inside. So now when I'm inside here, if I want to use time, I'll use the meter second. But usually I'm working in Newton meters, lever arm. Newton meters, lever arm, second squared, mass, greater and of. And so now it's defined with, you can use the Bose-Einstein condensate equations and solve them with tensors when you take this method of analysing the standard model. You take all the particles of the standard model and you arrange them in a sphere in terms of their numbers and their segments and their qualities and properties, and arrange them spherically static as a model. Apply a tensor to each of those points, a tensor, and that's a vector potential. So that sphere is going to vibrate, and the vibration will have a property and a quality, and the tensor will define it. So there's all the tensors, right? So this is now I and J. So you're analysing motion in different dimensions using the matrix to drop into them. And so the trick that Leve pulled for you in 1906 was to then take action in I. So everything that happens orthogonal to I, you can now analyse. You take I and you put it away. So all of the standard model, you put a sphere around it and you say that's expansion. And you put it over there. And then you look at the equator and you analyse the tensor now, and it's handed, left and right handed, as it switches between the two states of male and female from water. And it's about number, capital N, and scalar factor. So N is a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, it's counting. And scalar is how long it counts for when you analyze it mathematically. And so that the motion can be seen as a mathematics. And now look at AB5. So now the tensors are now J and K. So we've got the two hands. So take the three-pointed vector tensor and just stick it back to back. And now you've got three axes. But they're not three axes, are they? They're assembled at the center with a tensor that you don't see. It's this one, Leve. So you now analyze it between J and K. So you're still using the simple matrices to analyze this action. What you're doing is analyzing the orthogonal action to I. And it's two accelerations. And now you can see what it does. It's just the two accelerations of shear force. Expansion is constant velocity. And the surface area is meters squared per second squared. Two accelerations relative to each other. And so you can then see the AB5, the wave and the droplet, and the load of the wave analysed using bending moments by splitting that wave into 6 pieces. So you number them 0 to 60, and then the bearing number of the sphere at the base of this sphere that we're talking about, the one of light, is enormous. It's a straight line to all intents and purposes. But it's not a straight line, it's subject to bending. And so it creates a lens with a circumference, a massive circumference of the base of a lens from the bending force of the drop coming down. And that's the rigid body instant. A clamping action occurs at the center, and it has the effect on the outside of this clamping action. In an instant, from the expansion creates clamping instead, and that's the male motion. That's it. Slam! And now the female motion comes in of the reaction to that slam, of gently transforming it down to a slower velocity by increasing the viscosity. The mucus, it's all about mucus. We're just mucus on water. And so the surface of the water is where the moment of consciousness where it's experienced as this lens flicks through now to a sphere. So we've got a straight line that we know is not a straight line, it's subject to bending. In fact, it's subject to two bending forces, one that way and one that way. Tension and bending, this beam is in tension and bending, subject to moment load. And it's been expressed as shear force flow. Nothing else can move apart from shear force flow. Shear force flow is analysed as two accelerations. Does that make sense? So when you pop stood up now, when the lens, this massive lens of the base of the lens of the universe, which is only a tiny height, to h, so the height and the diameter and the circumference are all relative to each other. H is tiny. When you pop that h the other way, the spring is snapped. It coils back to a sphere at the centre to a dot point. But that dot point can't vanish. It goes to a two-dimensional plane. And that two-dimensional plane has a sphere around it. And that's the time particle. So inside the time particle is that wave that Leve shows us. And then you split it into 6 again, look at it from the top and you see the yin-yang develop. And so you've got twist force of the ripple to the spring at the centre, and then a yin-yang. So the other motions don't actually, are the ones, the motions it would go through as vector potential. So it should go through those motions, but it doesn't. There's no point. That would be wasteful. It just stays as a standing wave. And instead, the twist is maintained between the top half of the sphere and the bottom half of the sphere. Because it's an illusion that a sphere of water is a sphere. It's two hemispheres split by an equator. And the width of the equator is the width of the lens at the base of the bowl of which it sits. It snaps shut in every duration of Planck's constant, that tiny duration, 1 second. 1 real second is created, light. And so that equator, when the light happens, there's a reaction at the centre. The rigid body moment is when the surface contracts with this shockwave of charge shift. It's just a shockwave of charge shift at the surface. There's a sudden fixation in a rigid body. Leve 1906. It's experienced at the centre, at the dead centre, that tiny axis, the time particle. But outside of that, it just grows as spheres until it gets to a layer where the elastic membrane of these surfaces working together inverts fully. And then there's another transform, and it's our breath, which is transformed into our heartbeats. As these surfaces, this pumping surface action from the lens, the massive lens, into tiny dot point in the duration of Planck's constant, creates the moment of consciousness. Light flashes. And so if you add positive to that, your own life, you add positive to your own light. And that light is in our hearts. And that light powers the cerebral spinal fluid in the Z discs, of the action potential of the Z discs, the myocardial muscles, which is in its own sac. It's a sealed container, the heart. And so the pressure is experienced in light to your brain. And you experience consciousness. There's a pulse of the cerebral spinal fluid. And that pulse is experienced right from the spine, the kundalini, all that stuff. As a pulse, if you bring proper vibration to it, it pulses up nicely and you clear your mind. And all the stagnant ponds of CSF vanish and you can be smart. And that smartness then powers your heart, because your heart knows that it's loved. That's why it exists. It's loved by God. And so there's a link now between the love that you bring to your God, of your heart, of the existence, the truth of your existence, of water, mucus of water, experiencing that existence. There's a light around your heart. So the sac of the heart should be inflated like a sphere. to replicate the sphere of light that is around it from the moon. They're linked together. So the hemispheres, the crazy action of hemispheres down here twisting at the centre at the speed of light. So the two hemispheres twist together, they're static. At the centre there's a speed of light. There's an equator 10 to the 139 times bigger. And that's us. We don't see that because that is us. We emit the light. So we create this rotating half hemisphere, half white, half dark. We do around the Earth. That's the light, where the light comes from, that powers the universe, from Earth. And all the planets are dot points of the hemispheres that we see reflected back at us. We're seeing the surfaces of the hemisphere around us through a microscope, tiny. Yeah, so we think it's small, but it's actually massive. It's the spheres around us. So Saturn is the wobble, the complexity of the wobble that the Earth's precessionary axis does, its vector axis, so finely balanced for its north-south pole for the resets. So finely balanced, it's our own behaviour that controls it. Controls the vector axis of the planet at the centre of the universe through our behaviour. So I can prove that following Christ's greatest commandment and the health and safety rule is sufficient to run the planet in peace and love and harmony forever, when the Jews accept the words of Christ as the message of Christ, the message of God. There is God. Christ is God. Christ is speaking to us information that God needs us to know. So shut the fuck up and listen to Christ. Do as you're told. Do as you're told. Yeah, ready for the rapture? I am. I'm ready. This is the information it begins with. We're going to build from here. Yeah, just please, somebody in charge, speak to me. I've got some ideas that can get us out of this shithole. Follow the Rebel King.